Tonight, debate rages over the gun bill that would allow guns in Georgia's schools and churches.
Good evening and welcome to the Daily 11 at 7. Let's get started with our countdown at number 11. The big push at the state capitol for and against guns and where they're allowed in Georgia. Here's Paul Crawley from the state capitol.
The controversial gun bill known as the Safe Carry Protection Act came up for more emotional debate here at the Capitol today. But even before that hearing, the House created a second version of the bill with an end run and sent it directly to the state Senate. The hearing on House Bill 875 was held by the Senate Judiciary Committee, who heard from both sides. Opponents brought in some heavy hitters, like Dr. Christine King Ferris, sister of Martin Luther King Jr., and Lucy McBath of Marietta, whose teenage son Jordan Davis died in a controversial gas station shooting in Florida last year. Bill supporters included weapons owners and NRA members. But even before it began, the House passed a fast one. They amended a different gun bill that would now allow people over 21 with weapons licenses to carry guns in churches and bars that don't mind. The controversial question of college campuses was dropped, however. House sponsors said they created the second bill to force the Senate to deal with an issue that they had let die the year before.
The House has passed 3 bills in the last 2 years, and they have either got tied up or somehow they mysteriously fell apart. Well, this way, the people of Georgia will have that opportunity to see who is and who's not.
The Senate now has 2 versions of this controversial gun bill, one still in committee, which hasn't been voted out, and the second coming directly at them, both of which they could choose to ignore. At State Capitol, Paul Crawley, 11 Live News.
One of the mothers who testified today at the state capitol is Lucia McBath, the mother of Jordan Davis, the Marietta teen who was shot and killed in Florida 2 years ago over loud music. She's also the national spokesperson for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. Lucia, thank you so much for taking time. I know everybody's pulling on you right now. Obviously, you oppose this bill that's going through the state capitol, through the legislature right now. What kind of impact do you think your testimony had on lawmakers today?
I hope that it made a really big impact as a victim, because I think that's been the missing voice in this issue for so long. And so I think the more that you have victims and they're able to see us and understand our stories, I think that adds a lot of credibility to what's happening within, the country and the gun culture.
Well, I think lawmakers, at least some lawmakers who are pushing this bill, think that you're bringing to the table an argument against stand your ground. This is not stand your ground. This is a bill that gives, that supports the constitutionality of a property owner being able to decide who can bring a gun onto a property or not. I mean, that's that's legitimate. So it's not stand your ground. How do you rebut that?
Well, I always tell people that we're not after taking your guns away from you. We're not after your Second Amendment rights. But because the gun culture has become so violent in this country, you have to be accountable. You have to be made accountable for the ways in which you use your guns. We have to make sure that our children feel safe at school. We have to make sure that our citizens feel safe in church.
So is your argument that we should just not even have this law at all, just to err on the side of extra caution?
I would say so. Yeah. If we could repeal it, absolutely. But until that's the case, then if we can work on amending it, something's better than nothing.
And here again, stand your ground is one thing. What we're talking about here in Georgia in the state legislature is something altogether different, though you argue that it does breed a larger climate of gun violence.
Absolutely.
All right, so if this bill passes in Georgia, what's your organization's recourse at that point?
We will be marching. Absolutely. We will continue to fight in the Georgia legislature. We will continue to stand with those individuals that are creating the common sense legislation to change these laws. We are not going to give up. We're not backing up. We're not going away.
You have partnered with Trayvon Martin's mother in this fight as well. How powerful do you think you are together?
Even more so. And I think there's such a climate in the country that we've had to come together. We've had to, for the sake of what's happening in the country, to move forward, to really get people to understand the victim's point of view. We really think that we have a much better impact by formulating that coalition.
Very quickly, I want to switch to the retrial of Michael Dunn. Michael Dunn convicted, of course, on lesser charges. Do you think that the prosecution in a retrial will be able to get a conviction on first-degree murder?
We hope so. But based upon the law, there again, based upon the law and the jury instructions, that has a lot of impact, a lot of weight on how those laws are interpreted when they're deliberating.
How much of a difference does it make to you?
An extreme difference. I wish that that caveat for stand your ground was not in the jury instruction because it's ambiguous and it confuses the jurors.
Right, because he's already going to serve a long time in prison.
Absolutely.
But you still want him convicted on first-degree murder.
It's because it's principle, because it sends a greater message to the country that stand your ground can't be used in the way that it's been used, and that we have to make some definite changes to the laws.
All right. Lucia McBath, again, appreciate it. Thank you
so much for having me.
We find no logical reason to allow people to bring weapons into a house of worship.
It astounds me that any church official would be against HB 875.
You see it there. We start tonight with a heated day of testimony over the controversial gun bill at the state capitol.
Some of the most powerful testimony came from the mother of Jordan Davis, the teen killed after playing loud music in Florida. Paul Crawley joins us now from the state capitol with more on how this bill and all of the argument for and against it developed today.
Brendan DeMarco, that testimony was very emotional today. But even before that could happen, the House made a parliamentary Hail Mary play over that committee's heads.
It would be a terrible mistake to expand the law in this way. It would only feed a culture that encourages gun violence and would only lead to more senseless tragedies like mine.
Lucy McBath of Marietta spoke out against the State Carry Protection Act today, claiming it would encourage crimes like the shooting death of her teenage son Jordan Davis at a Florida gas station last year. Others speaking to the Senate Judiciary Committee included the sister of Martin Luther King Jr., whose mother was shot to death at Ebenezer Baptist Church in 1974.
House Bill 875 holds significant potential for enabling violence against innocent people.
Supporters claim the bill would only allow adults with gun licenses to better protect themselves against criminals.
They have been thoroughly vetted by the FBI, the GBI, and we have been fingerprinted. We are honest citizens who only want the right to defend ourselves and our family.
But an hour before the hearing, supporters of the gun bill pulled a fast one in the House.
It is on its way to the Senate.
Representative Alan Powell persuaded the House to amend a different gun bill already approved by the Senate by adding language about churches and bars that don't mind. But he dropped anything about college campuses, which killed the bill last year. Powell said the parliamentary switcheroo will force the full Senate to vote one way or the other.
They've at least ways got the House version now in front of the full body of the Senate. So there's no running and no hiding anymore.
Now that Powell has pulled this move with his House colleagues, the Senate has two versions of the bill. One still stuck in that committee, which hasn't voted on it, and one coming right at them on the floor. But they can choose to ignore either of them. It will be tougher this year since the campus carry portion has been removed. That is what killed it last year. At State Capitol, Paul Crawley, 11 Live News.
Tonight, the weight of history and a vision of the future figure into one of the most divisive issues in this state. And it is this: should it be legal in Georgia for people to carry guns into public buildings, churches and bars? Passionate debate today at the state capitol. And John, this bill passed the Georgia House. When will the Senate vote on it?
DeMarco, this one may very well come right down to the wire since there are just a few days left in this year's legislative session. So we do know that if the Senate does vote on it, it'll be before the end of next week. It's an issue that strikes at the core of who we are.
The two sides in the battle over the gun bill unleashed their biggest weapons so far. The battlefield this time, a Senate committee hearing. The hushed room listened as Christine King Ferris, the sister of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., described how their mother, Alberta Williams King, was shot to death playing the organ in church 40 years ago this June. So Dr. Ferris said don't allow guns in public buildings, bars, or churches.
That this proposed law would only make it easier for such horrific tragedies to happen again.
The two sides argued crime statistics and whether bringing a gun to a gunfight saves lives or escalates violence.
One armed person in one building can save many lives.
As a private property owner, I have that right to defend myself in my own home.
Why should anyone in public housing not enjoy that same right?
Lucy McBath of Marietta spoke of her son Jordan Davis, shot to death when a man with a gun complained about his loud music and claimed Jordan had a gun.
It would be a terrible mistake to expand the law in this way. It would only feed a culture that encourages gun violence and would only lead to more senseless tragedies like mine.
The Georgia Senate has a history of killing gun bills that the House passes. This time, the House tacked its latest gun bill onto a Senate bill to try to force a vote in the Senate.
The bill would allow guns into churches and bars only if the property owners choose to allow them. But DeMarco, even that opt-out provision is controversial. Again, we should know by the end of next week if this bill will pass.
I had a hot topic, John. Thank you so much for that report.